This is an editor's note. This script was written and recorded before Hyperdroid's theory on the name of the crying child, so I call them the crying child throughout the video. Go watch their theory though, it is really solid. Five Nights at Freddy's 3 is the first game where we see Afton in the flesh. And it's always really bothered me that the Vengeful Spirit seems nowhere to be found in that game at all. I mean, the Vengeful Spirit's one characterization is that they hate Afton and want him to suffer.
I will hold you here. I will keep you here. No matter how many times they burn us.
So why is the Vengeful Spirit, and by extension Golden Freddy, nowhere to be found throughout FNAF 3, the Afton game? I think I've figured out why Golden Freddy is nowhere to be found in FNAF 3 and figured out the meaning behind the FNAF 3 end screens, and it all has everything to do with Fnaf World. Wait, Fnaf World, isn't that game probably about the crying child? If anything, Fnaf World should solve FNAF 4, not FNAF 3. How's solving Fnaf World going to answer our missing Golden Freddy problem? Well, let's dive into Fnaf World and see what there is to see, because I think it's gonna blow your mind. It has been a common theory that Fnaf World takes place in the mind of the crying child for a few reasons. The dark eyes speaking to you at the beginning of the game say the last thing the crying child ever heard before death: I will put you back together. The Fredbear character that the crying child is so close with is the one who leads you along. Another good reason is that the game follows right after FNAF 4. It would make a lot of sense for Fnaf World to be answering questions that were brought up in FNAF 4, because that's how the franchises generally work. Questions that are raised in one game are elaborated on in the next. But one of the most common reasons I see for people thinking Fnaf World takes place in the mind of the crying child is that the map is shaped like a human brain. And just kind of. So many other theorists have cited this reason, so it really must look like a brain to some people, but it never really struck me that way. I mean, sure, it looks like a brain, but it also kind of looks like a computer chip, or a flower, or a bowl of spaghetti. And the map being a brain is one of the main reasons people think it takes place in the mind of the crying child, so I was never fully convinced. But John Fnaf has just released his Golden Freddy take and won me over once and for all that Fnaf World takes place in the mind of the crying child, because of evidence from the Fazbear Frights books. As John details in his video, the Stitch Wraith stingers tell the story of an animatronic called the Stitch Wraith, which is made of 1 to 3 souls at any given time. One of the souls, Jake, who has the most control over the Stitch Wraith, has the ability to see the memories of those around him and to influence them to some degree. He learns to use this power to rewrite the way agony-trapped spirits experience their worst memories and give them enough closure to move on. And I am convinced that this story is giving us insight into how Happiest Day works. We've recognized for a long time that Happiest Day is telling us about the crying child having a redo of his traumatic birthday in order to find some peace and move on. The Stitch Wraith Stingers provides us an explanation as to how that works. Another person can enter into a memory to alter it for the better. If this is the tragic memory that is keeping a spirit from moving on, altering the memory can free the soul. I believe that Fnaf World is a secondary character entering the mind of the crying child to alter their memories, just like in the Fazbear Frights books, and I'm gonna overview the whole game from the lens of this theory. But first, a very brief summary of Fnaf World in case you need to be caught up to speed. Fnaf World follows FNAF 4. In FNAF 4, we were introduced to the crying child, who the community believes to be William Afton's younger son. And we see his tragic death on his birthday, where his older brother and his friends try to scare him by bringing him close to animatronics he's afraid of, but this backfires when the Fredbear animatronic chomps down on his head and kills him. FNAF World begins with the last line the crying child heard before dying: I will put you back together. And it's nothing like any game we'd seen in FNAF before. It's an RPG game where you assemble a team of animatronics and make your way through the world fighting bosses and enemies and leveling up. You can also find clocks throughout the world that unlock a secret ending, but more on that later. The NPCs and bosses are very self-aware in FNAF World. They go out of their way to tell you that they are video game characters and you are playing a video game. It's fun, it's bright, it's cute, and Scott, who made the games, has said that he wasn't super pleased with the finished product, but that it is tied in with the lore of the canon games. Now that we have the premise down, let's examine the details that have led me to believe FNAF World is the story of a secondary character who enters the mind of the crying child to reconcile them to their unhappiest memory. In other media where characters travel into the psyche of another, They walk around in a world that reflects the mental state of the person whose mind they are in. There are features of the landscape and people walking around that appear to have their own agency, but are ultimately controlled by the subconscious of the host mind. You can affect the state of the real person by interacting with these elements of their subconscious, and the deeper into the mind you go, the closer you come to truths that are deeply buried or repressed in the mind of the host. Their fears, their traumas, their dark truths. I am, of course, referring to Phineas and Ferb's The Monster from Id.
Where are we? We're inside your subconscious.
Oh, and Inception, I guess. In Fnaf World, we have the same elements found in these types of media. The host mind is the crying child. The landscape that represents their mental state is the overworld biomes as well as the glitched environments. Things that seem like people with their own agency are the NPCs and enemies like Fredbear and these silly plants. We have the ability to influence the crying child's mind by interacting with their subconscious, and deeper layers reveal repressed ideas, memories, and truths, which we find as we go down glitches. Let's unpack these elements. Element 1, landscape. The first landscape of the crying child's mind is Fazbear Hills. It's full of Freddy's characters and bright, whimsical, childlike imagery. The area is a wooded hill with normal-looking houses and enemies that look mostly like plants and machinery. This area makes a lot of sense as an area the mind of a child might create, something similar to the home they grew up in. There are houses like the neighborhood we know the crying child grew up in, and many Freddy's characters and mechanical parts, which makes sense for a child who spent a lot of time at Freddy's and whose father had a big hand in building the animatronics. If you believe that the Fnaf 4 title screen house, and therefore the Curse of Dreadbear house on a hill, are the Afton's residence, then this is further strengthened, because that is a house on a hill, in a woods, by a lake, and Fazbear Hills is a hilly, wooded area by a lake. And I can't believe it's this early in the video, but we need to talk about Midnight Motorist already. Thank goodness we do not need to nail down the who, what, when, where, and why of every detail of Midnight Motorist in this video, but we do need to determine if this house is the crying child's house. Given the Easter egg in 5 Laps at Freddy's with the Midnight Motorist car having an antenna cap of the yellow bunny, I am going with the conclusion that the Midnight Motorist is William Afton, and this is the Afton residence. Meaning, yes, this is the house of the crying child. You can disagree with that conclusion and still track with this Fnaf World Inception Theory, but the assumption that the Midnight Motorist house is the Afton residence is a supporting point I will make in this video. The Afton house in Midnight Motorist is surrounded by woods. In Fnaf 4 and Curse of Dreadbear, it's shown to be a wooded hill. This is the crying child's default landscape that his subconscious mind creates. Just like my default landscape would probably be a cornfield, because I grew up in a house surrounded by cornfields. So it makes a lot of sense that the first area that you enter into in the crying child's mind is a wooded hill. The other landscapes on the surface, non-glitched levels of Fnaf World are a wintry forest, a mine, a lake, a graveyard, and a circus. Now, we don't have any particular association with the crying child's life before they died and mines, lakes, graveyards, or circuses, but these do seem like reasonable creations for a child's mind, especially a child whose subconscious mind has formed itself into a cute and goofy RPG game. I don't think these areas give us great insight into the crying child's life. I mean, the frozen area could tell us the crying child didn't die in the summer but remained in a coma until the winter. The graveyard could reveal that the crying child spent time at the graveyard visiting the grave of their dead mother. The lake could be the ocean of his tears, but more likely these are just the type of landscapes that would be created by a child whose subconscious is formatted like a whimsical video game. A lot of the games the crying child might have played at the Freddy's arcade machines would have had the water biome, the spooky biome, and a mine. There are a few more landscapes to cover than those found on the non-glitched layers, but we'll get to them when we talk about glitching down to deeper layers of the mind. Element 2. NPCs populating the subconscious world. The first NPC we meet is Fredbear, a fun cartoon version of the crying child's plushy best imaginary friend. According to Fnaf World Inception Theory, as I'm calling it, this character is populated in the world by the crying child's subconscious. The lead NPC being a version of the crying child's plushy best imaginary friend is a strong point for this theory. Scott could have chosen the FNAF 1 Golden Freddy, or the Classic Freddy, or the Puppet, all of whom are great contenders for the leader animatronic in the series so far, but he chose Fredbear, a character strongly tied to the crying child. Importantly, Fredbear NPC is a character populated on the top, non-glitched layer of FNAF World. In FNAF World Inception Theory, this layer is the surface level layer. It's fun, it's whimsical, but it's not necessarily true. This is the reality the crying child wants, not the dark truths he won't come to terms with. Those are buried deeper. This is reflected in Fredbear and Lolbit and the other NPCs we talked to on this layer. They're all playing a fun adventure about uncovering new areas, defeating mini-bosses, and beating a video game. They're not showing us memories of the crying child's traumatic death or his horrible relationship with his older brother. Those are buried deeper. The second character we meet, though, if we know not to click away too fast, is Glitched Fredbear, also a manifestation of the Fredbear plush. Glitched Fredbear looks even more like the plush we know from the Fnaf 4 minigames, but he's glitching and seems to speak to us more honestly than Fredbear. This is because in the crying child's mind, glitches are deeper and darker truths that the crying child has repressed. Glitched Fredbear is our first look into what's really going on in the crying child's mind. He tells the player that this fun, happy world is a deception, that if we just play along with normal Fredbear NPCs plan, we'll get nowhere because we're just being led along on a string. Fredbear alerts us that there is a deeper need, finding clocks. Glitch Fredbear is alerting the player that they are not going to achieve any greater purpose by just playing along with the games of the surface layer. And remember, the player of Fnaf World in this theory is a secondary character who has entered into the mind of the crying child to help them resolve their worst memory and move on. And Glitched Fredbear is the first one to cue them into something deeper, because this surface layer is a deception. This surface layer represents what the crying child wants to be true. Everything is bright and happy, and the Freddy's characters are all here having an adventure! But on this layer, the crying child is not coming to terms with the horrible things that have happened to him. He's only covering them up with something fake. The secondary character needs to enter the crying child's worst memory and reconcile it to him, but that memory is not going to be found on this layer. It's going to be found much deeper. Now, in the Stitch Wraith Stingers, where we get information on how entering a mind to fix a memory works, Jake, who is the one fixing the memories, doesn't at first know how to use his power. In Stinger number 8, he finds that he has this ability to enter the memories of others, and he figures out how to expand positive memories to keep the memories of tragedy from overtaking a person. Something similar seems to be happening here. Our secondary character, who comes into Fnaf World as the player, doesn't seem to know how to help at first. Glitched Fredbear is the one to point them away from playing along with the deception and towards the clocks. The clocks. So, in case you're not a connoisseur of Fnaf World content or Fnaf lore in general, in Fnaf World, the player can get a different ending by collecting multiple clocks throughout the world. These clocks lead you to very short minigames where you set up the Fnaf 3 Easter eggs that lead to Fnaf 3's alternate ending. In the Fnaf 3 ending, the crying child relives their traumatic birthday party where in life they had been bullied, bitten by an animatronic, and died. But this time, it's happy and peaceful, and there's a yummy cake, and their soul is able to move on. This peaceful redo of the crying child's birthday party is called Happiest Day in the games, and by the fandom. So we say, in Fnaf World, the player sets up Happiest Day. Glitched Fredbear guides our secondary character to the elements necessary for setting up Happiest Day, the clocks. This leads us to the third element of an Inception story. Element number 3, the ability to impact a person's real life by interacting with things in their subconscious. The secondary character, as the party lead, makes their way through Animatronica. Animatronic Land? They're working on the name. And they find the clocks that Glitched Fredbear warned them to look out for. And when they find the clocks, they can play these mini games. They push cupcakes into the box. They select the wall code combination. And the player in Fnaf 3 will eventually interact with all of those things on the cameras of Fnaf 3 to get Happiest Day. But let's zoom in on that moment in Fnaf 3 a little because it's very strange. Almost nothing in Fnaf is confirmed, but we can be pretty darn sure that the player of Fnaf 3 is Mike Schmidt-Afton, the older brother of the crying child, the son of William Afton, the player of Fnaf 1, parts of Fnaf 2, and who we find out in the next game in the series has had his insides scooped out but is miraculously alive. If we interpret the gameplay mechanics of Fnaf 3 very literally, Mike watches the cameras in the Fnaf 3 location, which is called Fazbear Frights. While watching for the dangerous animatronic in the building, he presses on the camera as they point to certain posters and arcades in the building, and he hits tiles on the wall in such a pattern that he's able to play arcade minigames to connect with his dead brother's spirit and set it free. While it would be far from the weirdest thing FNAF's ever done, looking at you, Fazgoo, that literal interpretation is A, very strange, and B, has no other precedent in the franchise. Many of the strange supernatural goings-on in FNAF get backed up in some way by the books or the movies or other games. We don't understand how animatronics are possessed. The Silver Eyes clarify that Remnant exists. We don't understand why spirits seem to lose their memory. Tales from the Pizzaplex shows us that spirits who can't find their body can't remember their death. And as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong because I still have some books to read, we don't have any additional story to clarify that a character pressing on a video feed image of something haunted leads to anything, arcade games or connections with spirits or other. I think clicking the Easter egg posters and tiles in FNAF 3 is much less literal than the gameplay would suggest. Mike probably isn't pressing on the cameras. We, the player, are because that makes for a clean and classic video game Easter egg, but this is likely a representation of something else going on in the FNAF games universe. So what is it representing then? Well, let's do a play-by-play. The secondary character enters the crying child's mind in Fnaf World to give them peace and help them move on. To do this, they must travel around their subconscious and find clocks in the world. Finding the clocks allows them to put together one of the pieces that will be used in FNAF 3. In FNAF 3, these pieces lead to minigames about random FNAF characters, and doing all of those minigames right leads to happiest day. Okay, time to unpack. A secondary character in the subconscious finds clocks in the crying child's mind. What do these clocks mean? We know the crying child has a clock outside their room, and as Matt pointed out in his very influential dream theory, the sound of the grandfather clock signals 6 a.m. in the original FNAF games, showing that your shift is over and you've beaten the night. But neither of these connections to clocks seems to have a connection with setting up happiest day. Maybe we should explore some other ways that clocks are used. They can be used to symbolize traveling in time, traveling back in time, say, to the worst day of your life in order to stop something terrible from happening. Sort of like what happiest day is doing. That's a solid theory. Clocks are also often used in games with time-based mechanics to add more time to your clock. Interestingly, when you find these clocks in animatronica, there's always a time limit ticking down when you set up the Easter eggs. It's like these clocks have given you just a few moments in time where everything is quiet, frozen, and you can do what you came to do. I think this is the most likely interpretation of the clocks. They represent that the secondary character has just a few moments to affect the crying child in this way before they must go back to playing along with that deceptive first layer of their subconscious. Almost like the crying child can't handle their mind being pulled away from that beautiful lie for too long. But how are they affecting the crying child when they do these mini-games? In FNAF 3, these Easter eggs are posters and arcade machines and wall tiles. Is a secondary character setting up these posters or programming these machines? And what on earth does it mean if they're doing all of this inside the mind of the crying child? I think this is a metaphor.
Was it a rock or is it a face? I think it's a metaphor.
A metaphor for the secondary character tying the trapped spirit of the crying child to the FNAF 3 location so that his brother can reach him and help him have his happiest day. These minigames aren't setting up the posters, but tying the crying child to them so that he will be in the right place at the right time to coincide with his brother. There is support in another entry of the franchise for this, the movies. In the FNAF movie, the crying child has a movie version named Garrett, and Mike has a movie version named Mike. Movie Mike takes the job as security guard at Freddy's and quickly finds he has a strong connection to his dead brother when he dreams in the building. He's convinced that if he can just dream enough, he will be able to find him in some meaningful way. And the Golden Freddy child, the leader of the movie's version of the MCI victims, shows that he has the power to connect Mike with Garrett in his dreams and tries to strike a deal to do so. I believe the secondary character in FNAF World is doing something similar to the Golden Freddy child in the movies. They find the clocks and have these moments to strongly influence the crying child by performing actions in their subconscious. And they're using these moments to make sure the crying child's spirit is more heavily tied to the FNAF 3 location. The crying child is in the posters, in the old games, and the memorabilia, even in the walls, so that when Mike arrives at Fazbear Frights, he'll be able to reach his brother more strongly there and help him have his happiest day. There's one weird point in all of this. In the Stitch Wraith Stingers, our template for helping a spirit move on by helping them escape their tragic memories, Jake doesn't need any secondary character to help the spirit move on. So if Fnaf World Inception Theory is true and this second character is inside the crying child's mind, why can't they just do happiest happiest day? Why do they need all this complicated mess with clocks and posters and have Mike do it? Because in the Stitch Wraith Stingers, Jake helps the characters he does by emphasizing their connections to real people who they love. He helps a homeless man, who's probably a character called Grim, by enlarging his good memories of dinner and life with his wife and kids. He helps Millie from Count the Ways by bringing her, in her memories, to a happy Christmas with her whole family. But where could someone bring the crying child in their mind to show them a time when they were loved and happy? We've seen a snapshot of the crying child's life in the Between Night minigames of Fnaf 4. We see the tragic memory of their death, and we see no evidence of a good memory that could redeem their tragedy. We see no evidence of a mother, we see an entirely absent father, and an older brother who relentlessly bullies the crying child and gets him killed. The Fredbear plush in the Fnaf 4 minigames tells the crying child that Mike hates him. And why would the crying child doubt him? Mike has made his life a living hell. The secondary character cannot enlarge the good memories of the crying child to help him move past the bad, because there's no good memory here strong enough. They need to find some way to connect the crying child to their loved ones in life, to connect them to Mike. Mike has to be the one to get through to the crying child. The secondary character needs to bring the two together. But what good will it do to bring them together if the crying child believes that Mike hates him? The secondary character must find some evidence of a good moment between Mike and the crying child to enlarge. So they must do what any protagonist in an Inception story must do. They must travel deeper into the subconscious to find the repressed memories and hope there is something down there that can save the crying child. Element number 4, deeper layers of the mind that reveal repressed truths. Glitch Fredbear has so far been the only glitch we've talked in depth about. He pokes through the deception of the happy facade of animatronica and reveals that nothing about this place is real or will solve anything. We must dig deeper, down to the glitched layers to see past the deception. Our first glitched layer brings us down to an eerie woods that looks just like the paths near the crying child's home. This world is stripped of its bright colors and distracting adventure, and we see something much closer to reality. The first repressed truth is revealed on this layer, that all is truly not well with the crying child. Just below the surface level, we find an eerie darkness, no happiness, no fun characters, no sparkling lakes or grand adventure. We just find ourselves alone in a dark, empty woods. But on this layer, our sprite does still look sort of like a fun Freddy's character that we've been playing as. Even deep down one layer, we still find some attempt to keep up the facade that this is just a Freddy game. Our second layer is much the same as the first, but darker, eerier, and more warped. You can hardly recognize our player icon as a Freddy character at all. And then we come to the third layer and we see it. The face of a ghost child, as it is often depicted in FNAF. 3 layers deep and we find the second repressed truth, that the crying child is not the protagonist of a whimsical adventure or a Freddy's character, but a dead child. This sprite looks not just like a ghost from the other FNAF games, but also a model of the crying child from this very game. It takes 3 layers below the surface for the crying child to come to terms with himself and recognize that he is a child who has died. We were warned back on the surface level that we must not go down too many glitches, or else we may not be able to return. But we have not yet found anything that can redeem the crying child's tragic death, so we must press further. We have to find a memory of some kind moment, some tenderness associated with his life. We have to save him. We must travel to the deepest glitch. The deepest glitch, the furthest down in the crying child's psyche you can go, is a red forest by a lake. It's eerily quiet. There's someone fishing by the lake. We walk over and talk to him. I'm sorry to say that you have gone too deep into the code. There is no way back out. My name is Old Man Consequences. Come, have a seat, and let's fish for a while. You have nowhere else to go. Old Man Consequences tells us the deepest, most horrible secret there is to find in the crying child's mind. That there is nothing more here. There's no way back out. He has been bitten and he's been killed. He can't return to life. He can't move on to death. He is trapped and there is nowhere else to go. This is the buried truth in the crying child's mind. They are unable to bring themselves back to life or move on to whatever comes after death. There is nothing here that can give them their happiest day. But this isn't the deepest glitch. There's a 5th glitch. 1 layer deeper in the crying child's mind. Drowning in the lake. There is one secret buried further than the tragedy of his painful death. There is one more truth, so deep in the subconscious it may never come to light. We force ourselves into the lake until we are on the verge of drowning. And then we begin to fall. down, down, deeper, deeper. So far down the crying child's mind that you wonder if there's even anything down here or if you'll just keep falling forever. And then it happens. You stop falling. The screen changes. Mike, with his arms around Elizabeth and the crying child, watching TV together. Happy, peaceful, and loved. And you see it. The crying child's happiest day. Old Man Consequences may have been the darkest truth, but he was not the truest truth. What's true is that Mike is still out there, somewhere, filled with remorse and trying to atone for what he did to his brother, who he still loves, and who he would do anything for. This is the happy memory that can be used to help the crying child move on, but it will take something extraordinary for him to remember it. It will take the crying child seeing Mike endure horror and heartache and so many nights risking his life working the night shift to save him. And it will take Mike reaching out to the spirit of his brother to help him move past his tragic death. And it has been set up. We've found all the clocks. We've ensured that they will be in the right place at the right time. All the pieces are in place for you. All you have to do is find them. Rest. Throughout this theory, I have not put a name to the character who plays the role of Jake in the story and seeks to help the crying child in order to tell a clean and satisfying narrative. But it's time to put a name to the secondary character. I believe there are two strong contenders. The first obvious choice is the puppet. The puppet is established throughout the story as being a guardian character who is refrained from moving on in order to shepherd the souls of lost children and protect them. The puppet has motive to help the crying child because of their compassion for lost souls. Jake, our Stitch Wraith protagonist from the books, who we have drawn a lot of information from in this video, has a lot of parallels to the puppet. Jake also is a good-hearted spirit who lingers when he could move on to peace in order to help lost souls. The puppet also is the character who is featured in the Fnaf 3 depiction of Happy as Day. They are the one who come to the crying child and bring them the cake just before they move on. Them being the one to come to the crying child in the Happiest Day minigame could close the case alone on our Fnaf World protagonist being the puppet. But there is another choice. The dark horse candidate for the secondary character is the Vengeful Spirit inside Golden Freddy. If you believe the Vengeful Spirit and the crying child possess Golden Freddy together, like Andrew and Jake in the Stitch Wraith, it's easy to believe that the Vengeful Spirit has the motive and the means because they're already very closely connected. But if you don't believe in dual possession, we still have clear evidence that the crying child and Vengeful Spirit communicate and care about each other. They communicate through faded and altered text in the security logbook. In that book, the Vengeful Spirit helps the crying child remember their life by asking them questions. Was your favorite childhood toy a plastic telephone? Does he still speak to you? The party was for you. The Vengeful Spirit is trying to spark the crying child's memories of childhood, as well as get them to face the dark truth of their death. So clearly the Vengeful Spirit wants to help the crying child in some way and has compassion on them. In the Stitch Wraith Stingers, once again our model for how this sort of memory manipulation can even be done, Jake is a clear parallel to the crying child, and Andrew is a really clear parallel to the Vengeful Spirit, to the point that many people think Andrew is the Vengeful Spirit in both the books and the game's timeline. But motive and narrative parallels do not a satisfying theory make. Want to know why I am 100% sure the Vengeful Spirit is our Inception Theory protagonist? Well, I spoiled it in the intro, but it's because they are missing for a huge chunk of the story. The Vengeful Spirit in the games and the books is the Afton Hunter and desires revenge more than all else. So where are they in Fnaf 3? Afton is right there, escaped, walking around, free as a bird to murder more innocents, and the Vengeful Spirit is... where? They couldn't even be bothered to make a showing? Many people say this is because the Vengeful Spirit has realized in some way that Mike is the one who has to take Afton down. But why would they come to that conclusion? They did a pretty good job springlocking him by themselves the first time. Why all of a sudden decide Mike alone can stop Afton? No, they didn't stop caring. They didn't decide to leave it to Mike. They're trapped in the fifth glitch, trapped in the memory of the crying child. In the Stitch Wraith Stingers, we learn more about memories than that they can be altered to help a spirit move on. People can also get trapped down there. Afton, Eleanor, and that one detective guy all at some point in the story get stuck in memories and are knocked out as major players until they get out. That's why the Vengeful Spirit as Golden Freddy aren't around in the Fnaf 3 locations. They're trapped in the crying child's memories, and I am so sure of this. Wanna know why? It's because Fredbear wasn't kidding when he said you can't get back out if you go down too many glitches. When you hit the fourth glitch with Old Man Consequences, the only way out is to close the game. But when you travel down to the fifth glitch in Fnaf World, the memory that the Vengeful Spirit has to find to set the crying child free, you can't even do that. It is a literal game mechanic that you can't get out of this screen. You can't move, you can't hit escape, you can't exit out, you are stuck.
Oh. I can't even press escape. You can't even press escape. You're just stuck on here. You're just stuck on here. You have to Control, Alt, Delete, and Task Manager it off. That's insane.
Except, of course, you can go to the task manager and close the game down manually because Scott didn't make malware. That's why Golden Freddy isn't in FNAF 3. They've gone too many glitches deep and are trapped in the crying child's memory. They have sacrificed their ability to hunt Afton for a chance at the crying child finding peace. And they can't get out of that memory until it's brought out of the glitches, until the crying child remembers it. Until Mike and the crying child encounter each other in FNAF 3, the crying child can't see that his older brother really loves him. And until the crying child sees that his brother loves him, the memory the vengeful spirit is trapped in cannot be brought to the surface. And until the memory is brought to the surface, the vengeful spirit is trapped and can't hunt Afton in FNAF 3. Though the puppet being the one in the Happiest Day minigame is a strong counterpoint, I believe the Vengeful Spirit is our Inception protagonist because it makes their absence in FNAF 3 make so much sense. If you fail to complete the FNAF 3 minigames and give the crying child his happiest day in FNAF 3, you get this bad ending screen. The classic animatronic heads rest on the ground, their eyes lit up. But if you complete happiest day and you get the good ending screen, Freddy, Foxy, Chica, and Bonnie's head all rest on the ground with no glowing eyes, but Golden Freddy is nowhere to be found. The community has been largely obsessed with the meaning behind the lights and the eyes and how many lights are in Golden Freddy's eyes, but I believe the most important information this screen tells us is that the Vengeful Spirit has been set loose to once again haunt Golden Freddy. Why is Golden Freddy's head gone? Because the Vengeful Spirit is back, no longer trapped in the crying child's mind, and Golden Freddy can get back to his old supernatural shenanigans of being mysterious, teleporting around, and getting revenge on Afton. What do you think of Fnaf World Inception Theory? Did I convince you it explains Golden Freddy's absence in FNAF 3? This is my first full theory and I am really proud of it, and I've got big ideas for what it means for Golden Freddy, Old Man Consequences, and the whole FNAF timeline. But it all still needs fleshing out, so if you have ideas, please, please, please don't keep them to yourself. Comment and let me know. If you're intrigued, consider subscribing so you can hear more, and if you're enraged and hate this theory, but you enjoy watching content that makes you angry, you can also subscribe. As long as your strong opinions are worded respectfully in the comments, I would love to hear them. This channel has been really inspired by other creators like Gibby from the Horror Homestead and those who reacted to Dual Process Theory's first videos, who encourage up-and-coming theorists to make videos and put theories out there because that's how we make progress as a community. So big thank you to all those creators. I have been Candy Bunny, and I have candy all day. Candy, candy, candy.